As far as the event tonight, I mean, one thing that I would emphasize, at least that strikes me about how it has been put together, is that what we'll be doing is looking at, let's say, returning to a text of Plato's, perhaps more than one, but certainly with a focus on Plato's Republic, in relation to specific works of art made by artists who you will be hearing from shortly. And there's really a millennia-long discourse about Plato or Platonism in relation to the arts and to aesthetics generally. But the opportunity here is, again, to return to the text itself and to look at specific works and to think about what kind of dialogue can happen between these works. And then I just want to say a word about the Republic, just as a choice of text to put into dialogue with contemporary art, the incredible importance that art, and especially the visual arts, has in the Republic, which may not be obvious since most of the text isn't about this. But just a word about the text as a whole. Most of it, so it's a 10-book work, most of the 10 books, books 2 to 9 of the dialogue, basically involve constructing an elaborate image, an image of a city in speech, of an ideal city, made of words. And what happens at the end of book 9, when they finally completed the discussion of this image, is that the interlocutors immediately turn to a discussion of images itself. Right? This is incredibly important because the reflection upon what images are, how they relate to truth, how they relate to the good, is of course a reflection on what the dialogue has just been doing in words. And I would point out the very well-known discussion of images in book 10 goes through this question actually twice. So this first in relation to being, right? So the sense of the relationship of the image, of the visual image, of the painting to true being. And then in relation to those who use the objects that the image depicts. So in relation to some kind of, let's say, question of the good of images. So again, this is the crucial place at the end of Plato's dialogue, where the question of how we understand images, how we experience images, how we make images, works of art, visual art is raised. And I will also point out that this is quite different than the earlier discussion of imitation, right? So the term mimesis, or imitation, is used to describe the character of the image. And in books 2 and 3 of the Republic, the discussion mainly focuses on speech and on performance, such as the performance of a tragedy. But what happens at the end, at this reflective moment at the end of the text, is the shift to the metaphor of painting, right? The image is now painting, and to a certain extent also writing. So we can think about these questions perhaps in the discussion further, in terms of how they relate to Plato's thought as a whole. The one other thing I'll add is that it's striking how the metaphoric the use of painting and sculpture in the Republic is everywhere. So if you read this text closely, there's a constant reference to painting, especially painting and also sculpture. To give just one example out of many, in book 6 at 500E, if you want the citation, there's a point when Socrates says, in order for the city that we're constructing to be happy, it must be made by a painter who is following the divine pattern. So this gives painting quite a task to follow in a way. And the last thing I want to say about tonight is, of course, we're not only going to be talking about painting and sculpture. So one of the things that, possibly productive aspects of bringing contemporary art into dialogue with Plato's discussion is that we can think about how this expanded range of mediums and artistic practices address these Platonic questions.